Hi, I'm Ted Padova. In this video, I want to talk about luminosity masks. So what is a luminosity mask? Think of the word lumens, which means light, and light in Photoshop Elements terms is brightness, and mask means that part of the image will be concealed and the other part is revealed. So a luminosity mask is a mask that cuts out certain areas of brightness. And what we can do is we can set up a luminosity mask that shows just the brightness values in the highlights and the brightness values in the shadows and also in the midtones. So without further ado, let's take a look at how we create a luminosity mask and how we would use one. Okay, I have an image open in Photoshop Elements, and as you can see, this image requires a little bit of a brightness adjustment. I could do that with levels, but let's see how we would handle this with a luminosity mask. The first thing I'm going to do is create a duplicate of the background. So on Windows, that would be Control on the Macintosh, Command plus J to duplicate the background. And I'll do it again to create a second duplicate. Control Command J to create the second duplicate. Now I'm going to go to the layer 1 here, and I'm going to create a mask. So I'll select the layer and click on the mask icon. And now what I want to do is copy the image and paste it into the mask. And I need to do that on another layer. So I'll click on the background. I'll press Control or Command A to select all. Then I'll choose Control or Command C to copy. Click on my mask and Alt-click, and you see just the mask appear in the window. Then I'll press Control or Command V to paste. And then I've pasted my data. Now, what this is going to do is give me a selection for just the highlights. So, for example, if I hold the Control key down on Windows or the Command on Mac and I click, you can see that the only selection I get are in the highlight areas. Anything from a 50% gray to white is going to get selected. What I want to do now is take this layer and I'm going to duplicate it. Once again, I'll press Control on Windows, Command on the Mac, plus J to duplicate. And don't worry about the quick mask there, we can get that off. I'm going to go to just the layer here, make sure that the mask is selected on this layer, and I'm going to invert it. I'll first deselect, then I'll press Control or Command I, and I'll invert my mask. Now what happens is, if I hold the Control or Command key down and click, I'm going to select the shadows. And as you can see here, the shadows are selected. I'll press Control or Command D to deselect. So the bottom layer here, I'm going to name this layer Highlights. And the second layer, I'm going to call this Shadows. Now I need to go for the midtones, and there's a couple of ways we can do that. We can try to intersect these two selections to create a selection for the midtones, but that doesn't really work very well. What we can do is sample a midtone value in the image. So I'm going to zoom in down here where these glasses appear because it looks like I've got some gray tones in here. I'm going to get my magic wand tool and I'm going to open my info palette. So I'll click on the little down pointing arrow adjacent to the more icon down here. Get info. Put this info panel just adjacent to the document window. And as I move around, you can see that the values change. What I'm looking for is a value that's going to be as close as I can get to 128, 128, and 128. That's a neutral gray. So you can see that I've got fairly close, right about here looks pretty good. In the tool options, I'm going to make sure that my magic wand tool has a tolerance range of 16, which I do. So I'll go back and sample the area that I want. Once again, I'm looking for 128, 128. This is very close right here. So I'll click And then what I'm going to do is go up to the select menu and I'm going to choose similar. So this is going to travel out and find similar values to what I sampled. I'll go fit in window, control or command 0 to give me a fit in window view. And what I have selected now is a fairly close amount of midtones. So I'm going to click on my second layer that I duplicated at the top here, and I'm going to click on the add a mask like. I'll label this as midtones. And now I have highlights, shadows, and midtones. I'll close my info palette here. And what I'm going to do now is duplicate the background. Once again, Control or Command J to duplicate. And I'm going to bring this up to the top. I'm going to use this layer to create my selections, and then I'll create additional masks. The first thing I'm going to do is hold my Control or Command key down and click on Highlights. I have the highlights selected, and what I want to do is create an adjustment layer for levels. So I'll go to the adjustment layer drop-down menu here, choose levels, and you can see that I have all the data here is pushed to the right. That's the highlight area. I can just move this slider over, and we can begin to refine these brightness values. You can see those eyes look pretty dark, so I'm going to maybe adjust this like so, somewhere around there. It's okay. And then I'm going to label this layer. I'm going to call this Levels Highlights. I'm going to come back to my background copy here. I'm going to select it. And now I'm going to create a selection for shadows. Once again, Control or Command, click. I've got my shadows selected, and I'm going to create another levels adjustment layer. So I'll go back up to my adjustment layers menu, choose levels, and now you can see that I've got all the shadow area pushed over to the left here. This is the shadows. And we'll bring this, actually, I want to bring this over and don't wash it out too much. Give a nice brightness value adjustment like so. It's okay. Once again, I'll click on background copy, and this time I want to make an adjustment for my midtones. So I'll press Control or Command and click. There's my midtones. Once again, I'm going to create another levels adjustment layer. And you can see that I have my midtones here. It did a fairly good job. Okay, we'll bring in the sliders just a little bit here. And let's see what we can do with the midtone adjustment. Have to be very, very careful here. Okay, something like that. And now I've created my luminosity mask with these three layers. Now I'm going to go to the top here, and I'm going to create a composite layer. So press Control Alt Shift or Command Option Shift on the Macintosh plus E, and we'll create a composite layer. At this point, what I want to do is, first of all, sharpen this image up. So let's go over to duplicate this layer. Let's call this Sharpen first. And then I'm going to duplicate it. Let's go to the filter menu and choose Other, High Pass. Now, what I'm looking for in the high pass filter here is not a very strong view of the outline of the image, but a much softer view. You don't want it to be too much. It'll add too much sharpening, and it will probably show up more on your prints than it will on your screen. But somewhere around here, that looks good. And I need to change the blend mode now to overlay. So I'm going to click on my drop-down menu and choose overlay, and I've added some sharpening. Now I'm going to create a merge of layers up here, the high pass layer and the sharpen layer. So what I'll do is select the top layer and press Control on Windows or Command on the Mac, and we'll just merge that top layer down like so. Now at this point, I want to add a color fill, but I can add a color fill to not just the entire image, but to any one of those areas that I've isolated in the luminosity mask, either the highlights, the shadows, or the midtones. So let's take a look first at highlights. Well, I changed my mind. Let's take a look at midtones. So what I have is the midtones is levels 1 here. I'm going to press my Control key down and click on this levels 1. I should have named these. And now what I'm going to do is create a color fill. So I'll open up my adjustment layers panel here and I'll choose solid color. And I want to cool this down, so I'm going to take a blue value over here and click OK. Don't worry about how it looks right now. We're going to change the blend mode and reduce opacity. So I'm going to go from normal down to color. And then I'm going to reduce opacity. And we want to get a little bit, let's say we have an image we want to cool down. I can cool down the highlights like so. Let's try something else. I'm going to hide this layer and let's try another one. I want to add some color toning in the shadows. So I'm going to select once again my sharpen layer up here, and I'm going to hold my Control key down. Macintosh, it would be a Command key, and then I'll click on this levels 2. This is my shadows. Once again, I should have named these. I have the shadows selected, and I'll go ahead and apply the same color fill. I'll go up to solid color, come over into my blue tones over here, get a very bright blue, click OK. Once again, I'll change the blend mode to color, and then we'll reduce opacity. And you can see that we've got a little bit of a blue cast over the shadow area. You can play with this in a number of ways. And at this point, there's really no right or wrong. It just depends on your vision for the end product, what you want this photo to appear like. You can see by using the luminosity mask, we can target different areas, highlights, shadows, and midtones, and apply our color fill to any one of those areas. Just one example of some of the things you can do and some of the fun you can have with creating luminosity masks in Photoshop Elements.